Do I pull this off today?
We'll ask Anthony Slater here on the River Islands guest line, because all guests on 95.7 The Game appear on the River Islands guest line. Isn't it time for you to discover the islands, River Islands, and Lathrop?
Like a mashed potatoes guy.
We know that Anthony Slater's a mashed potatoes guy. Is he a leather jacket guy? What's going on, Anthony? You're on with Spadoni and Shasky.
Bomber jackets. I like those.
Yeah. I'm good with that. But leather, bro.
Leather's next level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if worn correctly, like with the right fit by the right person, I think it can be pulled off for sure.
All right. We were just having a little fun here. What the hell's going on with Steph Curry's knees, though, before we get into the Thanksgiving talk with you?
He's 36. He's playing a long NBA season, and I think the Warriors are being just transparent. I mean, he had knee bursitis, by the way. He's been this is like the fifth time this year he's been on the injury report with like some type of knee term. But I remember the first one in LA, and we asked Kerr pregame, like, hey, is Steph playing? And he was like, oh, is he? He didn't even know he's on the injury report, but he just basically called it protocol. I'm not saying he's for sure playing that. I think they're covering their bases, because if Steph Curry does miss a game that he previously was not listed on the injury report, especially a national TV game, that's not good. That's when you start to get. So who the Hawks just got fined, right, for Trae Young?
Yeah. Embiid earlier this year.
Yeah. And again, so I'm not saying he's definitely playing, because I think the Warriors are putting that on there just because there's a chance he doesn't. But it's also in a lot of ways just kind of protocol, and the terminology might scare people, but basically, his knees are sore.
Well, the term bilateral has scarred every fan here in the Bay Area. As you know, Anthony Slater, maybe you drafted him in your fantasy league. Christian McCaffrey dealing with bilateral Achilles tendonitis. So you saw that term, and we got a little scared there. Obviously, different levels of the injury. But Kuminga, you going to play tonight?
I would, he practiced yesterday. So again, the fact that they have him listed on there means we'll see. They put him as questionable last time. It felt like he was trending towards playing. Usually when Steve Kerr comes to the podium pregame, as he did on Monday, and says, hey, he's going to warm up and test it before we decide, I'd say 70% of the time that player usually goes. Kuminga didn't, so must have not felt up to it. But the fact that he got into practice, it is 2 days later. Educated prediction on that one, and Steph he also plays tonight.
And how much have they missed Kuminga these last couple games? Obviously his size, height, athleticism, all of that, and especially in a matchup tonight against the Thunder, if they have to miss him again, it'd be a huge detriment.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, he's their downhill guy. He led their team in paint points last year. He set a franchise record in dunks. I think we could all there's always the conversation on, does he fit the Warriors style? Does he fit the Warriors long term? Should he play more? And there's times where maybe he is floating in and out of the game and not using that athleticism, to the fullest extent. But we know the uniqueness of his game and what it provides to the Warriors. And yeah, sure, you see moments, particularly like against the Nets the other night, where they could use a lot more downhill slashing, get out in transition, even his one-on-one scoring. Right? There's been moments this year where hand him the ball, let him try to beat a guy off the dribble. I think if he was your go-to scorer for 32 minutes a night every single night, it'd probably be he'd be a pretty inefficient 22 point per game scorer maybe. But there are certainly long stretches of games, especially on his better nights, where he can take over offensively, even if you just give him the ball. So, yeah, they missed it. They have been missing it, and they need it.
The other night against the Nets was very perplexing. Obviously, blowing 2 big leads back-to-back like that, not good. But part of why I guess I was thinking they were playing pods down the stretch was to be a ball handler, yet Curry was bringing the ball up the floor, getting pressured the entire way, which was a smart move because it looked like he was exerting a lot of energy, and then he had to get rid of the ball. And by the time the shot clock was winding down, they couldn't get it back to him. And I just don't love pods right now. I just don't love pods alongside GP2, Wiggins, Draymond, and Steph to close things out. Did we ask Steve Kerr, or did he give any inclination as to why Moody or Buddy Hield wasn't the other guy out there? I know Buddy wasn't having a great game. I just didn't love that combination of guys.
I'd say to your buddy, you made the point on Buddy. If he's not shooting it well, they usually kind of sink him into the background. Moody, this is a 4-year question with him, right? I mean, I thought he was really good. That would have been the type of game you would have thought Moses Moody earned himself more minutes. Clearly, it didn't happen. And then as far as to your Podziemski point, my read on it is like they're trying to get him going. I feel like, especially with Melton out, there's, internally there's a feeling of like importance for Podziemski to turn his season around. Because I do think over the course of the season, they believe he's not only an important piece, there's a decent chance he's the starting two guard, when you're down the line. And again, we can debate his long-term ceiling and this and that, but we saw what he was last season. He was their best plus-minus guy. He fit in so many lineups. He's the guy that took over Clay's starting spot, basically bumped Clay out of the starting lineup in the middle of last season. I think they just want to get him back to that. Again, I do think that, coaching game to game, I think that you could very much, I would hear the argument that it should have been Moody. Or I could even hear Lindy Waters, but my read is like they're really trying to get Podziemski going.
Anthony Slater joining us here on the Morning Roast, Spadoni in for Bonte Hill alongside Joe Shasky. And Anthony, Steph's comments after the game were interesting. After that loss to the Nets, I'm not going to say he was pessimistic. I'm not going to read too much into it, but what I heard from him basically was saying about this depth of this team right now, that they're going to find out a lot about who this team is in the coming weeks, because this schedule is really going to start picking up here. You got the Thunder tonight. Obviously no Chet Holmgren, but you got the Suns on Saturday, who just obliterated the Lakers in the third quarter yesterday. KD and Bradley Beal are for real. Then you got the Nuggets. Then you got the Rockets. T-Wolves back-to-back, basically. Then you got the Grizzlies, Timberwolves again, Pacers, Lakers on Christmas Day. I mean, are we going to find out who these Warriors are in this the month of December, basically?
Yeah, you got us all the way to Christmas right there.
Right?
You were telling me my next month. I forgot some of these games they're playing. No, I mean, it's a tough stretch, but take us back 2 weeks ago. I was talking to y'all, and it was like, remember that 5-game stretch where they're going to Boston, to Oklahoma City, to Cleveland? It was like, we're going to find out a ton here. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the NBA in a lot of ways, and you take it in subsections of however many games you want to say, 5, 10. Some people say 20 if you want to look at a very good statistical sample once you get through 20 games. And you do find out a ton. And I think one of the things we've discussed plenty, including just been discussed with coaches and players and front office people, is like, when you'll know more about this team when it hits adversity, because we've talked about the 12-man rotation and the great vibes and all this. Like, that's only going to happen when you're winning. When you do you've lost 4 out of 7. There's always more. It's just how sports works. There's always a little bit more grumbling about lack of minutes, or about who closed, right? If the Warriors just close out the Nets the other night, we don't care necessarily who closed. If they lose tonight, there's going to be question marks with the team that, a little bit like last season, I'd say a better version of it, has a bunch of players that are somewhat even, right? I mean, like the depth player, like 3 through 12 on this team, can make arguments on certain nights that they should close. And when there is when there's success, everybody, it's positive. But when there's, when you go through losing stretches, second guessing is very easy, because there's always other options you could have gone to. There's always people who believe maybe I should have played, maybe I would have helped get a win. So we, through this stretch, which you mentioned, all those tough games, sure, we're going to learn a lot.
All right, here's the best sports take you're going to hear today. That's not actually sports. It's a holiday take, but I'm going to phrase it like it was a sports take. You got it? You ready?
Okay.
I think Thanksgiving is the number one holiday and the most underrated holiday of them all. Every single year it's going to be on a Thursday, which means you have a short work week. Every single year you're going to have Friday off. You're going to have a long extended weekend off. You don't have to buy gifts, so it doesn't cost you a lot. There's no guilt from your significant other. You're not worried about getting your nephews and nieces gifts, and you got to get your parents gifts and this, that, and the other. All right? You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You just show up to someone else's house, preferably, and you eat, and you sit, and you watch football all day long. And when you're lucky, you go home with a plate full of food and probably some dessert. I power rank Thanksgiving the number one holiday of the year, and it's the most underrated. You say what?
I'd agree, and I would add one selfish aspect to it. For me, I'm not working on Thanksgiving because the NBA does not play. Whereas Christmas, I've worked like 12 straight Christmases, right? I mean, like I've been covering the Warriors. When was the last time they weren't playing on Christmas, or the Thunder back in the day? So I don't get to spend a large chunk of that day with my family. Whereas, yeah, Thanksgiving, the NBA is off and football's on and eating. And it's great.
Let me add to that. I also believe Wednesday night in your 20s to be the greatest drinking night of the year. You get back to town. All your friends are back in town. They're coming to visit their family or whatever. You show up at whatever your local watering hole is. There's people you want to see. There's people you don't want to see. There's some you want to stunt on because of your success. There's others you want to hide from because you're still living at your parents' house. Whatever it is. In your 20s, I believe Wednesday to be the greatest drinking night, Wednesday before Thanksgiving, of all the years. Of all the days on the calendar, if you will, of the year.
I will say this, I'm now in my 30s, and you need to escape that. You need to know when to that for that holiday to no longer be part of your life.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. But yeah, sure. I'm sure anybody out there early to mid 20s, by the time you're hitting your late 20s, I think, give up on that one.
It's sad. It's become sad at that point.
I did that in my early 20s. I was already over that for people from high school. So some people mature faster than others, Anthony. But I'm not mad at people that, still want to hang out and do that sort of stuff. But Shasky, you're from a big city, so it's a little different, right? Like Anthony, you're from, I'm not going to say you're from a small town. I don't know where you're from, actually.
Rohnert Park, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, so not super big.
What is the watering hole in Rohnert Park? Yeah. I'm going to let you finish, Spadoni. But
you actually go to Katati. Man, I haven't been back for that day in a while. I think it may have closed down, but I just know that street in Katati.
He's a family man now.
I love that.
Shout out The Family Man with Nicolas Cage. Underrated movie. Anthony, real quick.
Family Man
with Nicolas Cage. It's a good movie during the holidays. I'm saying
it is an underrated movie.
It's kind of a Christmas Carol, like a modernization of it. Anthony, Andrew Wiggins, dare I say, is looking like the all-star Wiggs again. And man, I know I'm very hesitant because I feel like I'm going to get fooled again from Andrew Wiggins because the last 2 seasons it's been 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Obviously, he had a lot of dealing with in his personal life, the passing of his father. He spoke about it ad nauseum this season about kind of being clear-minded, clear-headed going forward, and not having that burden, that emotional weight on him anymore, and just being freer, if you will, on the court. And you can see that on the offense. Specifically because his defense has kind of been there, but it's the offensive consistency that's really impressed me over these last few games. Do you see him being, I'm not going to say all-star because maybe that's a huge expectations, but can he get back to that number 2 Wiggs when he was that number 2 on that championship team with the Warriors a couple of years ago?
I mean, he has been through this small chunk of the season. I mean, he's been he's been, you don't want to say their second best player because Draymond has from the defensive end, but certainly their second, most consistent offensive kind of two-way player. When he's 40% for 3, to me, that's huge because he becomes a threat on the outside that kind of spreads the floor. When he hit that deep shooting slump early last season, at the same time Clay was going through it, they were trying to start Looney, who was also not having a good season. That's what snowballed him early that season because suddenly Wiggins, defenses stopped caring about him shooting 3. So the fact that he's back to a pretty high volume, 40% 3-point shooter is massive. I mean, but you mentioned it. Look, he is clear-minded. I don't think we can gloss over what he clearly went through the last couple seasons. And that was also physically too. He broke the rib 2 playoffs ago. Didn't have a very good summer clearly because he could barely work, prior to this past season, or I guess 2 seasons ago. And he didn't look in shape the first month and a half. I think if you actually go back and look at his last 30, 40 games last year, the stats are not that bad. It was just that first 2 months, which is, by the way, where their season, derailed. And he just had a really good summer of work. And he, I know he skipped the Olympics. Part of that was to really kind of, individually grind to be ready for the season. You saw Jamal Murray try to play through some stuff, and he played for Team Canada, and Joel Embiid for Team USA, and they just kind of have come into this season not looking themselves physically. Where I think Wiggins took the opposite tact, and he's looked really good, in shape. And I know he's always kind of a naturally skinny guy, so you can't tell as easily hey, is that guy in shape or not? But I think he came looking kind of like Andrew Wiggins' version of trim, and it's showing. And the way he could play 35 minutes a night and almost not look tired, that version of him is back.
I'll leave you this on Anthony, because we get a lot of people texting in, calling in the DeAnthony Melton injury and him being on the books and him being a potential trade piece. How, I guess, how should I phrase this? Do you see him getting traded at some point this season? And do you see the Warriors making any big moves within these next few months here? And DeAnthony Melton being obviously a part of that.
Yeah. January is typically when like the really movement month starts cranking up. I think Melton is certainly a vehicle that if that helps them get a trade done, it's very movable. You attach a pick to it and you can get somebody like in his contract range, although it's got to be a little bit less considering their first apron cap. You could add him to another contract if you find a bigger move out there, and you can kind of puzzle piece them together. But yeah, sure. I mean, it's a $12 million expiring deal, which is appealing, in the marketplace, especially when attached to an asset. So could be moved. I would say the only hesitation the Warriors might have with that is like, I do think that there's still a belief that Melton could be a long-term fit. And if you trade him away, you're trading away his rights, where I don't know how y'all feel, but considering how early in the season he tore his ACL, there's a reasonable chance, he would be back the start of next season. He's 26, 27 years old. If he's healthy, he's a really good fit for the Warriors. I agree. Long term.
It's never healthy though, Anthony. That's the problem, right?
Oh, it's fair. It's fair, but you would probably get him on a discount. If he did have a healthy season, you were going to get some extreme value at whatever number you get him at. But it's a very fair counter of that's a risk. They took that risk this year. It looked like it was working out well, and he only played 6 games. So there's a give and take there.
For sure. Hey, Anthony, we appreciate the time, man. You have a happy Thanksgiving. All love to you and your family, and we'll chat again soon.
See you, buddy.
All right, fellas. Yeah.
All right, he gone. Anthony Slater, R95.7 The Game, Warriors Insider, courtesy. I almost said courtesy. Yeah, we can't talk. River Island's guest.